This is Superintendent of Schools Bill Olsen, and welcome to another program of Education Matters, a program where we talk about the people and the programs in our school system. This afternoon, we have an interesting program for you. We have the advisors from Westford Academy and some of the students who participate in the Ghostwriters student newspaper. And the Ghostwriter has recently received an award, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we progress through the program. But Janet, welcome, and Jack, welcome. Janet Fonden and Jack Holbrook are the advisors. And we have Abby Cianciolo, Ethan Walshe, and Alok Ganguly. Did I pronounce your names correctly? Okay. I'm always sensitive to pronouncing your names. And welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
And let's see, Abby, you're a senior.
Yes, I am.
Congratulations. Ethan, you're a senior.
Yes, I am.
Congratulations. And Alok, you're a sophomore, right?
Yes.
Good. Well, I'm going to start on this side, okay, and I'm going to interview for a couple of minutes Mrs. Fonden and Mr. Holbrook. And tell me a little bit, Janet, let me start with you. Tell me a little bit about how long you've been at Westford Academy, what your background is, where did you go to college, what did you major in, and how did you became interested in being an advisor to the Ghostwriter?
Sure. My journey kind of began when I was in high school. I was on the newspaper staff, and we actually didn't have an advisor when I was in high school, and so a few of my friends and I worked on the paper and produced a paper once a month, and I loved writing, I loved production, I did all sorts of things for the paper, and I knew that when I went to college I wanted to give back to schools and be a person who was involved in a school in a way that other people weren't there for me. So I started majoring in communications at UMass Amherst, and I realized very quickly that I couldn't become a teacher with a communications degree, so then I switched over to major in English, and I did a double major in English and education, and took some journalism courses, worked a little bit on the UMass paper, and I worked at another school before coming to Westford. This is my 9th year in Westford, and I've always advised newspapers. So 13 years in the field, and I've always done it. So
Great. Now, did you grow up in the local area?
in Western Massachusetts.
Western.
Yeah, in Westfield.
Jack, how about yourself?
Well, my interest started in college a long time ago now, where I also worked on the school paper. I'm a relatively new teacher, and when I was doing my student teaching, I got my master's in education from Lesley, and my undergraduate degree was at UNH. And I was fortunate enough to work with Janet as my mentor. And of course that meant being involved in the newspaper at Westford Academy. And then I was fortunate enough to serve in Janet's stead while she was out on a maternity leave. And so I had more experience with this group at that time.
Now, have you
For a
always,
couple years now.
Jack, always been in the teaching profession? Or did you
No,
have a
I'm
prior
relatively
career?
new. This is my second full year at Westford Academy.
Prior to that, in another field? or-
Real estate business and the
Oh,
restaurant
interesting.
business before that.
Interesting. That's, you very rarely have interviewed someone with such a diverse background. It's always fascinating. The restaurant business, I understand, is quite difficult.
It is. It's exceptionally difficult.
Yeah, so,
I don't recommend it.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
thank you
you.
for all the work you do, because I think it's important for everyone to realize how much work goes into being an advisor to a very active club and organization or sports team at the academy, and it's hours and hours and hours of work, and not only during the school day, but particularly after the school day and on weekends. And Abby, tell me a little bit about yourself in terms of how you became interested in the Ghostwriter, and what are some of your favorite courses at Westford Academy?
I became involved in the Ghostwriter program as a freshman. I kind of had signed up for journalism just as kind of on a whim, I guess. I always liked writing. I remember when I was little, I would always have like little stories that I would make my siblings read. So I just thought it sounded like a interesting class to take part of. And so I signed up for the class. I was in the class. And then I started getting involved with the club. And I really enjoyed it. Then from there, I think when I was a sophomore, Miss Fonden offered me the position of photography editor. Since I had been doing some work with photos, so I became the photography editor, kept working on the paper, and then senior year, I was chosen to be one of our 3 editors-in-chief. So it's been a great experience for me.
That's terrific. Some of your favorite courses at WA?
I think some of my favorite classes, besides journalism, are a lot of the business courses. I'm the president of the DECA club at school, so I've taken...
That's a terrific organization.
Yeah, I love it so much. And I've taken almost every business class there. I think one of my favorites was probably Marketing 1 with Mr. Rogers, who's a great teacher and a great person.
It's interesting because my background really was not in education. I have an industrial engineering undergraduate degree and received my MBA. I went to Babson College for my MBA, and I thought I was going to go into the private sector and just happened to get into education about 44 years ago, almost by accident. But it's been a great career, but I always like to hear students taking business courses. And one of the courses that I hope we offer to a greater degree at Westford Academy is courses on innovation and entrepreneurship, and because that's what's really necessary down the road when you get into the private sector, if you're going into the private sector, to sustain our economy and society in general. So you've done a great job. Tell me about, you also serve on the school committee as a student representative.
I do.
Because we see each other at the school committee meetings about once every other week. Tell me about that experience.
That's been a really fun experience for me. Again, I'm in student council, so they were looking for people to go. So I volunteered, and I was chosen. It's been cool for me because I've seen a lot of the things going on in town that I was not even aware of. Especially as a journalist, that's been good to bring some of those ideas back to the club and to kids in class. And it kind of makes me feel more part of the community when I know what things are going on, and just being able to be a voice for all the kids at school, to the school committee.
That's great, because it's very important. The school committee and I consider your voices to be very important on the school committee, because if I want to know how to improve the school system, I'm not going to go read something out of a textbook. Okay, I'm going to go to Mrs. Fonden and Mr. Holbrook and say, what's working and what do we need to do to improve our school system? And it's the same with you. I'd go to you, and I have done that on occasions at the high school, talk with groups of students saying, what do you like about the high school and what can we do to improve our school system in general and Westford Academy, since you're there specifically. And I've had some great ideas from students. Ethan, tell me a little bit about yourself in terms of your interest in writing and journalism. Some of your favorite courses also at Westford Academy.
Well, my experience was similar to Abby's in that I saw that journalism was being offered as an elective my freshman year, and I'd always sort of been interested in writing. I'd been told I was pretty good at it, so I thought it was something I'd want to hone my skills in. So I took that class freshman year, as I said, had a great time, thought it was really enjoyable, and decided I'll take it again the next year. And I guess I've just repeated the process a few times since this is my 4th year taking the course. Similar to Abby, I kind of worked my way through the ranks to get up to editor junior year. And then senior year, Kyle and Abby joined me, and we've worked kind of as a triumvirate this past school year. In terms of my favorite classes, I've always enjoyed the journalism class, obviously, because it's very different from a lot of the other classes. You're not, taking notes and listening to lectures or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that teaching style, of course, but it's just not necessarily conducive to the journalism course. It's a lot of, okay, here's your assignment, you need to get this done, kind of thing. I've always liked that. I love English. It's been one of my favorite subjects throughout my 4 years. And this year I discovered I really like calculus, which is very different for me. So that's what I've been doing.
Good. One of the things, and Alok, I'll get to you in 1 second. One of the things that I hope you bring to journalism in the future is a great degree of honesty and integrity and ethics in reporting. I think, and I probably don't am not alone in sharing this opinion. A lot of the quote-unquote journalism today is sort of migrated towards tabloid journalism, and not necessarily presenting factual information, but information that will grab a viewer or a reader or a listener's attention and keep that attention for ratings. And I think lots and lots of people in this country are yearning for as much of a return to the ethics in journalism as possible. It's not all about selling papers or ratings on TV. It's about honesty and integrity of reporting. So I strongly encourage you to follow that path, and I know you will. Alok, tell me about yourself.
Well, when I was in middle school, I really liked to write. I really enjoyed reading too. From a very young age, I used to read all the time, and I saw that journalism was an elective, and I decided that I would take it, kind of improve my, public speaking skills, talking with people and interviewing others. And I got into it, and I just really liked it. It was just great, and it was definitely an experience that was quite unlike any other class that I was taking. It was much more hands-on, which I really liked about it. It wasn't all just like sitting down and taking notes, as Ethan said. It was a lot more interactive, which is something that I've always been a big fan of. And I'm continuing it this year, and I'm doing that for the foreseeable future, so looking forward to it.
And that ability to communicate effectively is extraordinarily important. And I'm glad you mentioned that, and you've all touched upon that in terms of ability to communicate. About 8 or 9 years ago, I interviewed executives from about 12 major corporations that were in the greater Westford area, because I brought in Mr. Antonelli and at that time Mr. Goldberg, who was the assistant principal, because I wanted us to hear from those executives about the skills that our students would need 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road when they're out of Westford Academy and out of college. And a manager, a top-level manager from IBM, said, "I bet you're going to expect me to say math, science, and engineering principles." And I said, "Well, I would assume so." And he said, "The biggest need for students in the future is the ability to verbally communicate well and communicate well in writing." And I was very surprised, because he said, "I have some of the best engineers that I've ever had at IBM, but their verbal and their written communication skills are greatly lacking." And so you're following the correct path based on the input I've received, because it's all about making connections. It's, the faculty in Westford Academy is a superb faculty, because they connect with each other and they care about each other, they support each other and help each other grow. And so don't you as students. It's all about your ability to connect with your peers, and you grow from that, and they grow from that. So love your observations. Abby, you're a senior this year. You have an internship that you are participating in?
Yes, I have my last day of my internship tomorrow. I've been working at Bluestone Consulting Group, which is a management consulting business out of Acton.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working with their marketing department there for the last 6 weeks.
In what capacity?
So as a consultant, the day kind of changes day to day, depending on the clients that we're working for. But some of the things I've participated in, they do event management, so I've sat in on logistics calls, making sure different packages are sent where they need to go for different trade shows. One of my main things was I was in charge of social media, so I've been editing blogs, posting blogs, and kind of coordinating all of that together with one of the internship persons that I'm working with, named Amy, as well as kind of doing some list management, reaching out to new clients, and things along that line.
Very interesting. I know several people who are in that field, and it may be different from company to company, but in my discussions with them, they always mention a lot of pressure, a lot of important timelines to meet,
Right.
and a lot of travel. So I'm not sure if it's the same in the company that you're interning in, but sort of what I've heard from people in the similar companies.
Yeah, not so much the travel for them, not all the time, but definitely working efficiently. You need to be responsive to your clients or else they're not going to work with you. And you're not an employee of that company, so you have to be able to do all your work outside of the company, which means you don't always have all the information. So you kind of have to just go into a project, get it done as quickly as you can and with the most information you can utilize.
Interesting. Ethan, how about your internship?
I was actually not on an internship
Okay.
this fourth quarter. I had didn't really work into my schedule with my AP classes and all that, so I have my last day of high school tomorrow instead.
To Abby, you and Ethan, congratulations, and Alok, I know you're going to have a great future at Westford Academy also. So let me ask you about some of the articles you write. Now, let me ask you, how many times have you criticized the superintendent?
How many snow days?
And that's okay. It's interesting, and the reason I ask that is because I had a wonderful experience meeting with some fifth grade students at the Christopher School back, during the winter of this school year. And they had a persuasive writing exercise, and it was either supporting a particular snow day decision I made or criticizing. And it was fascinating. I spent about an hour talking with all of the fifth grade class, not the entire class, but that particular class of fifth graders. And it was just a wonderful experience. So what are some of your favorite articles that you've written?
You want to go first?
Sure. We were talking about this a couple minutes ago, but I think one of my favorite articles that I've written, I believe it was sophomore year. Kyle, who was our sports editor, was going to be away over Thanksgiving vacation, which meant there was nobody to write the Thanksgiving game story for football, which is like the most important football game of the whole year. And nobody volunteered to write it, so I did. And I'm not really into football. I watch it a couple times a year. So I had to go to AB and watch this game and try to figure out what was going on and write down everything I possibly could. And then somehow turn it into an article that was factual. And that was an interesting process for me, not knowing everything that went into the game. I had to kind of just figure it out. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting about journalism, is that sometimes you just have to jump into things and figure it out as you go and hope for the best. And it ended up working out because we actually won an award for that story. So that was an interesting experience, yeah.
You grew greatly writing that story because you needed to learn something quickly.
Right.
Yeah. Ethan, how about yourself?
I think one of my personal favorites that comes to mind was this past year for our midterm. Ms. Fonden wanted us to kind of to tackle a larger topic than you might traditionally say, oh, here's a feature on this athlete or X, Y, and Z, what have you. Take a larger topic and approach it from a number of different angles. So you could have a few different articles to go with something. So I worked in collaboration with a classmate of mine, and his name's Andy Dunn, and we were looking at the issue of student loans because we thought, it's very topical. Seniors are getting college letters now. They're applying to all their schools. They're going to consider finances, obviously, as something. We wanted to see if there was something we could do to kind of broach this issue about students taking out massive amounts of money and then being in debt for years after their education, if that kind of thing's worth it. So we actually sat down with David Keel, who was on the school committee at the time, and discussed, I guess he's works with bankruptcy a lot, so he's had some experience with people who've defaulted on student loans and been in huge debt and that kind of thing. Talked with him, talked with some Mr. Scott Cruikshank, who graduated from Westford Academy. He mentioned he'd taken out a loan to attend Duke. Talked with him, talked with a bunch of students about what their plans were with college and loans and those kind of things, and we brought it together in about 3 or 4 different pieces about the national issue of college loans, how WA educates people about loans, what students think about it, and then our piece kind of saying, this is something you really need to consider, and I thought it was an important issue to talk about, so I thought and I think we delivered well.
That's a great article. I've been teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in economics for about 35 years now. And in the last 10 years, I've spent more and more time in 1 or 2 classes talking to students about consumerism as it applies to higher education and the cost-benefit analysis and payback of expensive versus not so expensive college educations. Is it worth spending $50,000 and $60,000 and shortly $70,000 a year for college education or not? And I think more and more parents are beginning to ask that question and talk to the students. I think that's why the enrollment in state colleges and universities has been growing so rapidly in the last 5 to 8 years, is because parents are understanding that it's very difficult for all of you to come out of college with a $200,000, $150,000, $300,000 debt level that is assumed before you take on any other debt in life. And it's extraordinarily difficult, and you have to really think that through, and families are thinking it through, because it's the cost of a college education has indexed upward far in excess of the general level of wages across the country and most other products and services. So, Alok, how about yourself? Some of your favorite articles?
I think one of my most favorite articles was something that we actually were assigned at the very last minute. I remember coming into class one day, and Miss Fonden was telling us that some people in school were a little bit upset over the new park exam and the fact that the juniors had to all take that for a day, and they were missing some AP classes for it, and it was a big scheduling conflict. And we actually had that for our long block, which was around 2 hours long. And it wasn't because of the article that made it one of my favorites, but it was really the energy that we had in the room. Like, our entire staff collaborated together, and we all went down to the cafeteria. We got people's quotes. We did everything that we could to get an entire piece consisting of 6 or 7 different little segments, not featuring student opinions, featuring student quotes, some of our own opinions, and a regular news article about what the park entailed. And we compiled that all together in around 1 class period, which was just amazing. And normally, most of the time, our articles are usually individual efforts, and it's much more of like a solitary type of thing when you're writing. But having that day and having that piece with everybody working together in the room, it was just great to work together, and it was a really good experience to see how our staff can come together and conquer an article in a very short amount of time.
That's great. And I know, Ethan, you've interviewed me in the past, I think with Kyle, just after the Newtown tragedy.
Yes, I did, yeah.
And that was particularly difficult. And interestingly, I think a lot of parents, when they think about school safety and all of the things we have to think about, think it only is confined to keeping intruders out of the building or trying to manage a situation if they are in the building. But there are so many other factors that you need to consider. In fact, I was participating with others in the area in a meeting with a dispatcher from Newtown, Connecticut last year, going over all of the post-tragedy issues that you have to deal with in terms of dealing with the clergy, with the services, with public memorials, with things such as how do you accommodate all of the emergency vehicles that come to a location? How do you handle the attendance of state or national dignitaries and that security? How do you deal with the volume of gifts and contributions and setting up those funding mechanisms and with banks and warehousing all of if it's little children, unfortunately, all the toys and gifts, and it had a profound impact on me for about 2 months after I attended that debriefing session with the Newtown, Connecticut dispatcher. Alok, I know you talked to me about school security also, and unfortunately there's only a limited amount of information I can disclose, because you never want to talk too much about what your security measures are or are not, because that might give someone some information who may be wanting to present some level of danger to either all of you or our staff or both. And so it's, let me quickly ask, because we have about 3 minutes left, and I want to get back to Mr. Holbrook and Mrs. Fonden before we close. Any particular person that you, in the media, national media or local media, who you sort of idolize or look at with a great degree of respect?
Actually, just a few weeks ago, I went to a networking conference for my internship, and I had the chance to meet Liz Bruner, who was on Channel 5 for a long time, because she has now opened her own communications practice where she's teaching executives how to publicly speak. So I really like her because she kind of blended communication and business, which is what I'm hoping to do in the future.
Wonderful. Ethan, how about yourself?
I've been watching a lot of the anchors on MSNBC for the past few years because my dad just kind of put it on television at night, and I would start listening. And that's something that's got me very interested in politics, which is what I hope to study political science next year. So that got me interested in that. And so people like Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow I've always just found to be really brilliant people who are very smart and can break things down and explain them really well to others. And I've always admired what they do.
Great.
I'm much more of a radio listener, and I really enjoy listening to all of the National Public Radio programs that they have going on. It's really interesting to not only visually see something, but to have an image that is described so well just by the use of words. And it's definitely something that conveys a lot of, I guess, power. It's got a lot of power behind it when discussing important
It's going
things.
to bring that honesty and integrity to the profession in the future. Jack and Janet, what can you tell me about the students in the Ghostwriter, your impressions of the students who you work with in the Ghostwriter?
This has been a great ride these last couple of few years. This has been an exceptional group of young people who have really invested in the professionalism of the journalism at Westford Academy. It's been a privilege to watch them go.
Janet?
I agree with Jack. I think that this senior class in particular, we have about 8 students in the class, and most of them have been involved since their freshman or sophomore year, and they all bring something unique to the table. They all have different strengths, and they complement each other very well, and I'm going to miss them dearly next year, just in the class, but also on a personal level. I get to know them very well. So
That's an important element that I want to convey to all parents too, is that you really develop a bond with students, and they become an important part of your life, not only in the short run, but in the long run. I think all of us, now I've been in this profession for 44 years, and I can still remember some students from 30, 40 years ago who really made an impression on me. And first I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Abby and Ethan and Alok and Jack and Janet.
thank you.
You know, I've often said that the quality of our school system is all about people, the quality of the people. And once again, you've seen some of the best, and the reason why we are ranked as such an excellent school system. So thank you to everyone, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. And thank you for watching.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.